Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Marissa McCasty. I am the Leadership Development Manager for the SUNY SAIL Institute. I use she, her pronouns. And if this is your first time joining us today, welcome. I have started the recording, so for those of you who would like to share it with those that are not here, feel free to do that. We'll be sending that recording after this. But for those of you who this is your first time with a SAIL event or session, we are the Strategic Academic Innovative Leadership Institute, and we provide leadership development programming for faculty, staff, and students across the system. You will find us here every third Thursday of the month at noon for these interview style webinars on different leadership topics that you all care about and want to know about. Just a few housekeeping items. Like I said, I have started the recording, and if you have any sort of questions that you would like to have our panelists answer today, feel free to place them in the chat, and I will be monitoring those as we go along. Before we introduce our speakers, I would like to take a minute to go over our topic for today, which is leading quietly, understanding the power of introverted leadership. So for this topic, successful leaders can be introverted, extroverted, ambiverted, which means a person who has a personality that has a balance of extrovert and introvert features. And today we're focusing primarily on introverted leaders in higher education, and how to understand and leverage leaders, introverted leaders in higher education, and the power of the quiet leadership that introverts possess. As an introvert and sometimes ambivert, I am excited to explore this topic with our panelists and you all today. So let's get started here. So what you will learn today is articulating the importance of introverted leadership in higher education. Understand the misconceptions, the stereotypes, and potential challenges facing introverted leaders. And we'll discuss strategies to effectively support those that have similar or different leadership styles to you. As a definition, to give us a starting place, Merriam-Webster defines introvert as a person whose personality is characterized by introversion, a typically reserved or quiet person who tends to be introspective and enjoys spending time alone. You might have a different definition, you may not agree with this definition, but this is the definition that we will use today to shape our conversation. And I would like to launch a poll really quickly. And we're going to ask you, what brought you here today? Are you an introverted leader looking to learn more? Are you an extroverted leader looking to learn more and support the introverts in your life? Are you an ambiverted leader and looking to learn more, or other? And if you feel comfortable, please place that in the chat. See these answers coming in here. We'll give another couple seconds. We usually don't do a poll, but it's nice to know who all is in the room. Okay, I think we are good. And then I'm going to share the results here. So we have 64% of you that are introverted leaders looking to learn more. 11, thank you, extroverts who are looking to learn how to support introverts. We appreciate you. And I'm an ambiverted leader. We have 22% of you. And other, we have 3%. I don't see anything in the chat, but if you want to, along the line, let us know. Feel free. All right, so I will stop sharing that. And let's get to introducing our speakers. With us today, we have David Cantafa, who's the Associate Provost for Academic Programs Planning and Assessment at SUNY System Administration. Welcome, David. We have Allison Poliati, who is the Associate Professor of Teacher Education at SUNY Plattsburgh. Welcome, Allison. And last but not least, we have Jamia Williams, Health Sciences Librarian at SUNY Brockport. Welcome, Jamia. Okay, so let's get started and let's get to know our panelists. So we'll start with David. Please introduce yourself and share how you have navigated your role as an introverted leader.
Great, thank you, Marissa. So in my work at SUNY System, I lead the office that works with all SUNY campuses on academic program development and registration, as well as we contribute to the development and implementation of system-wide academic policies such as general education, seamless transfer, and so on. In this, we also work with external entities such as the New York State Education Department and Middle States. And I've been at System since 2016. Prior to that, I worked at the University at Buffalo in the Graduate School of Education. And prior to that, I began my professional career as a teacher of high school biology. So regarding the question you asked, Marissa, I'll say that, separate from being asked to participate on this panel, I would not have identified myself as an introverted leader. Yes, generally, I think of myself as introverted, but when I think of my approach to leadership, I think more so of descriptors such as reserved, which you had referenced earlier, thoughtful, and most importantly, purposeful. I do tend to lead with listening and tend not to center myself, but there are certainly situations internally and when engaging with others that I flip this as needed. And to others that I work with, it may be a surprise that I generally consider myself introverted, because in certain professional settings, at times I present in a manner that would suggest otherwise. So in other words, I have learned how to leverage my introverted leanings when they are of benefit, and to push at the boundaries of my comfort zone when such leanings are of detriment.
Thank you. Wonderful. Absolutely. And Allison.
Thank you, Marissa. As Marissa mentioned, my name is Allison Pugliati. I'm an associate professor in childhood education at SUNY Plattsburgh. And in the fall, I will be starting as the chair of our department for the first time. I also serve as the co-director of the New York State Master Teacher Program in the North Country region. I've been at SUNY Plattsburgh. I just completed my 6th year here at SUNY Plattsburgh. Prior to this position, I was an elementary school teacher on Long Island for 7 years. And then I served as an elementary school principal on Long Island for 12 years. And then I moved up to the North Country in my current role. So how I navigated my role as an introverted leader, well, it really begins in childhood, where when I was a child, I grew up in a family of many extroverts. So I always thought I was shy because that's what people told me. And everyone said, stop being so shy, stop being so shy. So I always thought that it was a negative part of my personality. I tended to be quiet and reserved and spent time thinking about my decisions before moving into action. And that was even supported in elementary school and high school, where I noticed that students were praised when they were fast thinkers, when they were the first to raise their hand. The more outgoing the students were, the more positive praise they received from teachers. So I always really thought that my personality type was more of a negative. So I really worked hard at becoming more extroverted. I thought that that was what I should do. I even became a cheerleader in high school, was not looking forward to it, but I said maybe that would help me to become more extroverted. And I was actually elected to be the captain of the cheerleading team, which was my first entry into leadership. And although I was quite nervous, it was then that I realized that it was fine for my personality type to be quiet and reserved, but yet still be a leader. I received positive feedback from my peers because they appreciated that I spent the time to listen to their ideas and incorporate their ideas into our team activities and decisions. And that positive feedback really allowed me to see that I am introverted, and that could be a positive thing for myself. And it also enabled me to see that I could pursue leadership in many different ways. and still support my own personality type. And that led to me then pursuing a career as a school leader. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And Jamia.
Hello, thank you. I'm Jamia Williams, and I use she, her pronouns, and as everyone knows, I'm the health sciences librarian at Drake Memorial Library at SUNY Brockport, and I started my position in August 2020 in the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that was an interesting time. And also, fun fact, I'm an alum of SUNY Brockport, so coming back full circle to where I felt like Brockport made me who I am and added a layer or several layers to who Jamia has become. So that has been definitely asset to my career trajectory. So recently, it's interesting that this opportunity came about because recently I have been thinking about how I want to lead, and because I am an introvert, this made for another layer to add to my time of reflection and planning of my career trajectory. And so I have navigated my role as an introverted leader by using my reflective abilities to imagine what I want my role to be and assess how I'm doing, and also when necessary pivot when I need to make adjustments. And since starting my role, as we're navigating the pandemic, during the beginning, we had a lot of new updates. And so I had to lean heavily on my abilities and my community that I created within librarianship to, overcome those challenges and those new updates. And also, as an introvert, I do value close relationships. So that is definitely important to me, and is also important to me as a professional in the librarianship world.
Thank you, Jamia. And my next question is for David. What is introverted leadership to you?
Thanks, Versa. So I have not studied introversion generally or introverted leadership specifically. That said, I think you said it earlier that there are multiple definitions of introversion, and operationally, there's not just a dichotomy of introversion versus extroversion, but instead people live along a continuum and also may change their relation to that continuum, based on the factors in the context in which they are. For me, generally speaking, being around others is especially draining. And that's, for me, when I think about introversion, is sort of how I operationalize the meaning of it, is that being in group settings, especially, it's draining and not energizing. That said, I do want to share something that challenged my thinking about my introvertedness, and perhaps also about what I think about introverted leadership. So when I returned to working regularly in the office last year, I was actually surprised by the extent to which I felt and continue to feel energized and not drained by being around others. And so this is in one-on-one meetings, in group meetings. Being in the same physical space with others has been exceptionally energizing in ways I did not anticipate, and have really enjoyed being back around others because of that energy that I get through that interaction in person. And again, this is in one-on-one meetings, in group meetings, impromptu, planned, all of that. So maybe I'm changing because of the pandemic a little bit.
Thank you for those interesting insights, for sure. And so while we know what is introverted leadership, Jamia, why do we need introverted leaders like us in higher education?
We need introverted leaders like us because observant and reflective folks are important to make change happen. We bring a diversity that is important and valuable to an institution. Because we are reflective and introspective, that leads to us being creative, which is definitely necessary for change to happen on a campus.
Good points, good points. Thank you for that. And Allison, what strengths or skills do introverts bring to the workplace, and how can they maximize them? I know Jamia mentioned a couple of them, but what are some strengths or skills?
Sure. So I'm going to base my response on some of the scholarship that has been done in the field of introversion and extroversion, particularly related to leadership skills. At the end of the presentation, I know Marissa is going to share some of the references, so that's where I'm getting some of my information from. So particularly is that introverts can and do make strong leaders in a variety of settings, both academic and businesses as well. And this is because some of their strengths and skills, specifically, they have a strong ability to listen and be receptive of others' ideas. So they tend to seek input from others and incorporate that feedback in their decision making. They listen carefully, they're receptive to the suggestions that are made for their own personal improvement as well. And this also makes them effective leaders of very vocal teams, which might seem counterintuitive to think that an introvert would be a good leader of a vocal team, but because of their ability to listen to others, they tend to be strong leaders of teams like that. Another strength is their ability to be in tune with the feelings of others. They have this strength because they tend to have good observation skills and they're able to understand different perspectives. So they're able to step back and not dominate conversations, but rather helping others generate new ideas based on what they're hearing from others' points of views. They also tend to have the ability to show restraint in social situations because they tend to slow down and think before they act. They're able to make thoughtful decisions. A final strength of the introverts are their quietness, their reserve, and their being reflective. So this personality type allows them to observe and analyze situations before making decisions, and also to self-reflect frequently, which helps in their own improvement.
Thank you for that, Allison. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of strengths that we as introverted leaders bring to the table. I just wanted to open it up for Jamia and David. If there's anything that was in your mind that Allison hadn't mentioned that you wanted to bring up, if not, we can go to the next question.
Nope, good to me.
All right. And just as a reminder for those that have logged on with us recently, if you have a question as we're talking and discussing that comes up, please place it in the chat and we will ask our panelists. Okay, so Jamia and Allison, what are some misconceptions or stereotypes about introverts? And we can start with Jamia.
One, that we are shy. Some of us are, but I'm not a shy person. And that's a big misconception that has, people have labeled me. And when I first meet people, most of the time I do not initiate conversation. So that can be perceived as being standoffish. I have been labeled stuck up, but or shy, but I'm just observant. I'm just seeing how people are and how I can maneuver around different people. And another misconception is that we don't like people. Some of us might not like people, but I don't. It's just that I don't get energized by being around people, especially around many people. And my sweet spot is smaller groups or by myself because I value getting to know people on a personal level.
Thank you. And I know that there are folks in the room that can relate to what you are saying, so thank you. And Allison, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Sure. So I think for some challenges for introverts is how they are viewed as a leader. Typically, we support leaders who are extroverts. So society tends to have that traditional view of an extrovert being the strong leader. So it's a challenge. It could be a challenge for introverts to be accepted as a leader with this personality type. There have been many successful leaders, though, that have been identified as introverts. So for those of you in the audience, you might appreciate knowing that Gandhi, Eleanor Roosevelt, Rosa Parks, and even Bill Gates have been identified as being introverts, and they've all been really very strong, successful leaders. So one reason why this is a challenge, because introverts' leadership style tends to be very reserved. So rather than having more of an authoritative style, they tend to be more of a coach, and while advising others and then expecting them to follow through. So that at times could be misinterpreted for poor leadership style. Another challenge for introverts is that introverts tend to be undervalued in American schools and businesses, where extroversion tends to be viewed as more of a commodity. So in schools, many times teachers overlook the strengths of introverts by punishing them with poor grades for participation, and as well as in businesses not allowing introverts to advance to those leadership positions. I think to add to Jamia's observations with some misconceptions, I agree with her observations as introverts being perceived as shy and appearing cold and distant. Also, their reserved personality can sometimes be seen as a lack of interest in the topic at hand, where really they're just processing the information. It tends to take introverts a little bit of time to process information, where it could be seen as a disinterest or a lack in social skills, when they're really being thoughtful and trying to analyze the situation before they respond.
Really good points that both of you made. Thank you for that. And I see in the chat there's a comment here, and a challenge is when people question whether we are quote unquote assertive enough. So yes, thank you for that addition. I did also get a question here. How do you handle an introvert supervisor and let them open up a little? I struggle to get feedback from them. How would you handle that? Whoever wants to take that.
So basically they're having a hard time getting feedback from an introverted supervisor? Is that what they're asking? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
I would suggest, like, is there a different type of way that they like to communicate? Because sometimes people like to communicate in a written way. Maybe providing them with questions that you are wanting them to answer is definitely helpful. With introverts, they might need some prompting to get out what you are looking for. So those are maybe some ways to help.
That's a great tip. Thank you. David and Allison, anything that comes to mind with that one?
I guess what I'll add, and without knowing the specifics of what has happened thus far, but I think if not starting with the basics of asking for the feedback about specific things, I think that's a good starting point. If that has happened and it's not sufficient feedback, I think just more questions, and this is not about introvertedness, but I like questions, for example, and so that's a way to sort of structure an expression of what your need is that then would be helpful to respond to.
Thank you. Yeah, both really helpful on that. Thank you. So let's see if okay, there's some comments in the chat. Thank you for that discussion. And someone had said, note, the assertive leader is a very male-centric model. Someone had said, I appreciate the comment about introverts not being authoritative leaders when that tends to be valued more in business. I actually think that is less valued in higher ed, and more facilitative, collaborative leadership styles, which are characteristics of introverts, actually works well in higher ed. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So David and Jamia, how do you network as an introvert? We can start with David this time.
So I will say that networking is a challenge for me. Generally, I'm not comfortable in unstructured social settings. So for example, at professional meetings, meals, cocktail hours are stressors for me. I would rather work through a meal or have a meal on my own. And rather than network through a social setting, I would rather develop networks of colleagues in a structured manner through the work that we're collectively doing. So of course I do engage in social settings with others professionally because I have to, but it is particularly draining for me rather than energizing because I really need to work myself up to engage initially and then throughout the engagement as well. So that to me is a significant challenge.
Thank you.
Yes, it reminds me of a Twitter thread that I was reading a couple weeks ago about like small talk has returned because, you know, most of us were working remotely and then now we're in person or hybrid. And so that like whole stressful situation of small talk. And so, you know, that just reminds me of what you were saying, David, around that thread. But yeah, so as an introvert, I have to network with intentionality. So if I know I'm going to an event to network, I have to remind myself to initiate conversation and to put myself out there. Also, I have to make sure that I do exchange information. And I would say the last 2 jobs I landed were because I networked with folks at a conference and through a committee. So another way that I network is through service involvement. So this allows me to collaborate with people from different libraries and organizations, and this oftentimes leads to other opportunities with people. And this is a great way to find, what has been a great way for me to find my people. And this is a great way for people to, you know, find community within these organizations. So if they have like interest groups, this is a way that you can find people that share your identity or interests, and also find people that are different from you. And this can create an opportunity to collaborate or be an ally to other people. Another way I network is through social media. And that's helpful to me because I feel like it's low stakes for me, and it's a fun way to interact with people. So as a librarian, we have #library Twitter, which is very active. And also Instagram is popular as well for a lot of information professionals. And I know that some are on TikTok. And lately I've been trying to update my LinkedIn page. I know that's a way for people to reach out to me, connect with me as well. And the last thing I'll say is because of networking, I have colleagues that I have an interest in connecting with and I might not know. So oftentimes I just ask, you know, other people that I'm in community with, do you know this person? And sometimes they do, and they can connect me with that person. And I have done that for people as well. They have reached out to me, asking me if I know someone, and then I connect them to that person or people. So those are my tips on networking that has gotten me through, you know, my introversion.
Those are great. Thank you very much. And we do have a question here. As introverted supervisors, how do we support and mentor other introverts and help them and others overcome assumptions about introversion? Great question.
I would say it's not like one size fits all as far as like introversion goes. Yes, we have some similarities, but you know, just getting to know that person for themselves. Like I said earlier, some introverts are shy. So if they are shy, then coming from that point of view, and then some of us are not shy. So, okay, so, you know, giving them tips that way. And then also just listening to what they want to do with their career or what they want to do with their current position does help too. And supporting introvert and providing them with tips and strategies that way as well.
I don't know if David and Allison, if you have anything else to add. The one thing that came to mind too is, and I can send this to all the registrants with the recording, is we have a couple articles that are Harvard Business Review articles that are conversation starters around mentoring. And I do think that even if you're an introverted supervisor or not, they're helpful in starting a discussion with your mentee. So we can share those as well. You're welcome. All right. So what are some challenging scenarios or misconceptions introverts may face? I know we talked a little bit about this, but does anyone have any response for that one?
So Marissa, I'll take a shot at this one to get us started. So I think that one of the comments in the chat was referencing this a bit is gender roles and personality types. So the intersection between the two, where there's been some scholarship exploring how male extroverts tend to be valued more than female extroverts. So females who are extroverted tend to be viewed as being challenging and aggressive, as opposed to their male extrovert counterparts. When it comes to introverts, introverted women tend to have a little bit of an edge there over introverted men. So as leaders, where introverted women are accepted more and viewed more as transformational leaders, as opposed to introverted men. So this is particularly in leadership roles for females. So female introverted leaders tend to have that little bit of an edge in perception of others than those introverted men. So I think that's something to really take into consideration when we're working with our colleagues and others, of not only thinking about how we're perceiving them based on their personality, but also of what their gender is, how they identify, and to see how that's being impacted. Another challenge, David referred to this a few times, is these large social interactions tend to be physically and cognitively draining for introverts. So we can be successful in large social interactions. It's not as if we can't be successful, but afterwards we are physically drained and need to recharge. So that could be a challenge if we have back-to-back large group interactions without having that opportunity to recharge.
And that leads me to like conferencing. You know, as a professional, we have opportunities to go to conferences. And one of the good things that came out of the pandemic is more virtual conferences. So that lends itself to taking the breaks that I need without, you know, people trying to figure out where I'm at. But you know, and what I had to learn early on in my career is that it's okay to take breaks, that I need to take breaks, because of being an introvert does drain me. And if I know and come up with those strategies on how to navigate that. So because social interaction fatigue is real, and that can be a challenge. And also, I want to say I try my best not to discount the importance of extroverts and ambiverts, because they do play a very important role in an organization or institution. And I don't like that introversion has this negative connotation associated with it, like it's bad. And many of our great leaders are introverts, and we would never know. So hopefully this can, you know, change hearts and minds, or, you know, at least thoughts of the value that introverts do bring to organizations.
If I could just add one thing is related to the misconceptions part of the question. And I realize that today we're focusing on introverted leadership, but I would hope that there's not an assumption that, you know, people, that's always at the forefront of one's identity set. You know, I don't think about introversion often, actually, and certainly it does impact, especially again in the networking piece. But other than that, it's really not often at the forefront of how I think about who I am and the interactions that I have. It's just there as part of a set of a whole range of other things.
Yeah, really, really good points, all of you, and even David, when you were saying about, it might not be for some people a very salient identity. It might be part of, part of them, but it's not something that they focus on every day. I do want to address a couple questions that are coming in. In what ways can extroverts develop more introversion traits like reflection, etc.? And I will say too that I prior to coming to SAIL, I worked in the Office of Applied Learning, and in that office we talked a lot about reflection, and so I do have some resources that I can share out as well. With the Convo starters, I can also share out those reflection exercises, and maybe something will motivate and inspire some reflection. But I just wanted to add that in case anyone had anything else.
Marissa, I can just say, and this is based on personal experience only, so it's an N of 1, but I would think about how you would sort of typically do something and do the opposite. And that's the work that I've had to do. So when I began teaching in high school, that first year, my inclination would have been to stay in the classroom, between class periods and such. But I knew that that was not going to be a good thing. And so I intentionally and purposely walked around the school as much as I could, said hello, interacted with it, because I knew I need to push myself. So I assume in the other sort of direction, something similar would be a good thing, is to think about what your inclination would be and do the sort of opposite. It seems like a simple trite kind of thing, but it's helped me in a lot of ways.
Good advice.
I would also like to add that our personality traits do evolve over time. So we do, as a population, tend to get less extroverted as we age. So that is something that we're constantly evolving. But something in the moment to help a lot of the mindfulness-based stress reduction activities focus on that reflective piece of it. I've done a tiny bit of work in that field, and a lot of that fits well with my personality, so I tend to enjoy it. Some of my friends who have explored that as well, who are extroverts, find that to be a little bit more challenging, those mindfulness-based activities, but have found that to help them slow down in the moment and to be a little bit more reflective before making some decisions.
Thank you. And we also, shameless plug, we have our mindful leadership courses starting September 6th. If you are interested, we can also share out information about that. Registration is still open. So thank you. And then we do have another question here. Do you think that introverts are less valued than extroverts, and that leads people to hide their introvertedness?
In my opinion, yes. Because I'm shocked when I get to know a leader and they tell me, oh, I'm actually an introvert. And I'm like, I would never have known. And I don't think they will feel comfortable just telling everyone. They just so happen to feel comfortable telling me, because then I disclose that I'm an introvert, or we have okay, the meeting is over, and then we just retreat to get, recharge ourselves and reset. So yeah, I don't, that's my opinion though.
Definitely, thank you for that. Allison and David, anything you have to share with that?
I think it depends on the situation. I've worked in a number of different school settings with different administrators, and I've been very fortunate to work with a few administrators that really value introverts and understand introverts. So that has been very supportive, particularly in my current position, which is wonderful. However, I have worked in other places where that the traits of introversion were not as valued, and I was encouraged to be more aggressive in certain situations that just didn't match my skill set or my level of comfort. So I think it really depends on the situation and your colleagues who you're working with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And at least for me, I think also about how it's important. I feel like my introvert would just exude anyway. So I might as well be honest with myself on that. And then it also helps, like you all had mentioned, your teams, your supervisors, to be able to work better with you. So thank you. So how do you articulate to colleagues, friends, or even family that you need to recharge when you are experiencing energy drain?
So I'll start that, my colleagues, friends, and family who know me know that I need to take a break from others. Especially at offsite in-person work meetings with large groups. I do what I can to take time to be myself, typically by going for a walk or a run or going to work out. I grew up as a runner starting in second grade. And so it's been part of my identity, for nearly my whole life. And for me, being, on the road with earphones in is such an important way for me to recharge. I'll say even outside of professional experiences in my personal life, there are times I need to recharge, even when I'm just visiting family and friends. So I've been known to take a break from others by, again, going to work out, or even at home, just going and doing yard work. So actually stepping away from family that are visiting and just going in by myself and doing yard work, just so that I can recharge. I should also say too, and this is one of those intersections, and it goes back to what I said about being purposeful earlier. I tend not to like to just sit back and socialize when I know that there's always something that needs to be done. And so I feel like whether it's exercise or yard work or whatever, it's not only about recharging and being alone, but it's also about being purposeful and doing things.
Definitely. Allison and Jamia, how do you articulate to your colleagues and family and friends that I need a minute?
Yeah, I feel like it's easier to articulate that with my family and friends and colleagues because I am combating stereotype threat on a professional level. It's hard to articulate that I might need a minute because I don't want to offend people, and it's a whole thing. So I haven't found that sweet spot yet where I can say I need a minute, but so I think what has helped me is getting up, going for a walk, like doing intentional things like that so I don't have to articulate and offend people that I need a moment or I need a break. I just bio break or whatever. I just use a caveat there so people won't get offended that, I'm being drained.
No, it's helpful. That's helpful for sure. Anything to add, Allison?
Sure. So I don't think that I necessarily articulate that I need that time to recharge. I don't articulate it to anyone, but I try to be purposeful in my daily schedule. So if I have an activity that's socially draining, I try to build in something else that would be quiet and solitary. So for example, I teach classes, which I love. After the class, I'm exhausted, just mentally and physically, just from all that social interaction. So I tend to build in, after I teach, some time where I'm working on a research project or something where I'm being productive, but it's not in a social way. And then I'll schedule the block of time for, say, my office hours. So I really try to build that into my schedule so that I do have breaks from those social interactions as well. Also, I have, when David was speaking, I said, oh, gee, that's why I like to do these solitary activities. Like I'm a big gardener, I crochet, I like to jog. So these are all things I do by myself that are just natural ways of recharging after these social interactions.
Wonderful. Yeah, these are all great, tips. And one thing too that I do is just listen to music, because it just puts me in a different place and I am able to recharge because of that. And I'm sure others in the room have their different ways of recharging. If you do, feel free to share with us in the chat. We'd love to hear those. This next question, I know we've touched a little bit on it, but how can colleagues be allies or create space for those who are introverted leaders?
So I'll tell you what I want to say is I want to say don't push, but instead let me decide how to engage. However, I know that sounds kind of selfish, and there actually may be value to being pushed to engage more with others in certain circumstances. I also might want to say to help create a structure in which unstructured settings become more structured. But that also sounds like it's shifting the burden of responsibility to others. And certainly there are others out there that are more energized than drained by unstructured settings and actually would be more drained than energized by structured settings. So it might not be fair to ask to organize around what might work better for me. So I guess in saying both of those things, I want to say I need to think more about this because I'm not quite sure actually.
And that's a really good, it brought up a point, is just asking who you work with, your colleagues, or even family and friends, how best to communicate with you, and what they would like and how we can help support them. Jamia and Allison.
Yes, that's definitely good. Like when I first get to know someone, that's one of the questions I ask is, how do you best communicate? How can I best support you? Because I realize we're all different and, we all operate differently. So that's very important. So I would say, just know that in a meeting, we might not respond right away, and don't take offense by that. We are just taking in the information and processing it, and we definitely might have a response after the meeting. So just be aware of that, and or a question or anything like that as well. And also, David alluded to this as well, is like providing an agenda helps me. Like, I want to know, what are we going to talk about, so I can, be prepared and also provide the best input that I can have at the meeting, which will, have a way of having a fruitful conversation will be the best for me. And I understand sometimes there's not, you don't have an agenda, but that does help. And let me see. Oh, and then also if there's an opportunity to allow folks that wouldn't want to engage, to give them an opportunity to engage in the conversation is helpful too. So just thinking of those things.
Definitely. And I wanted to build on what you said, Jamia. It's just patience, like you said, for processing, for it might not be right in the meeting, but just giving that person time to process and give you a real thoughtful answer. I definitely agree with that. But Allison.
Yes, so I agree with all of the ideas that were presented. Also, giving introverts an opportunities to be able to work independently, so they can be successful working in teams. However, they prefer many times to work in a partnership or even independently. So maybe giving introverts that kind of opportunity. For physical space, we tend to prefer private offices as compared to like an open workspace design. So if that's ever an option, that's something that could be really beneficial, just so that we have our time to ourselves a little bit. We also might need some support with building networks. This goes along with Marissa's earlier question of how do we network? So we might need some support with building networks, with public speaking, and even with engaging in small talk. So if you know that you have a colleague or someone that is an introvert, just providing that kind of support to them to help them get them started with those kind of interactions. Some others is, just giving that time to allow introverts to recharge after they're engaged in that social situation, because remember, introverts have the ability to engage in more extroverted type of activities like giving a speech or public speaking. They can do it, but they just need to be provided with that time after to recharge a bit. So if we're able to give that to them, that's helpful. Another thing that we could help our colleagues is providing them with time to think and prepare. So a little like what Jamia was saying, with providing that agenda in advance, or if it's a one-on-one meeting, possibly providing the questions that will be asked in advance to allow that time to prepare for it, and even allowing us to write out our ideas and thoughts at times rather than speaking them could be a helpful support as well.
Really great strategies. Thank you. And I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any other questions, but I have one last question for you all, and I'm going to reshare my screen here. But do you have any recommendations on low or no budget resources that are available to our audience for this topic? And I will reshare my screen because we have and I will ask if Jamia or Allison want to talk about these here.
Yes, so shameless plug, I did write a blog post titled The Introvert Network, Tips on Networking as an Introvert in the Library Profession. I feel like it can be helpful for anyone in any profession, and it just unpacks the whole idea of what introversion is, and also, give some tips and strategies on how to network. And How We Show Up, Reclaiming Family, Friendship, and Community by Mia Birdsong. I'm currently reading this book, and it's just helpful in talking about how to build community, which is so important. Even as an introvert, what this pandemic has showed me, how much I lean on my community, how important they are in my life. So just everyone, I feel like, needs that, even extroverts, and creating those intentional relationships. Mia unpacks a lot of that in the book. And these other 3 books I did not read, but I saw they were highly recommended for introverts. And so those titles, I know Allison recommended Quiet as well. So cool.
Yes, and I actually am reading Quiet or listening to Quiet on Audible, so hoping to finish that soon. But Allison, if you want to talk about that second resource.
Sure. So a little while ago, I wrote this chapter about really looking at the intersection of personality and gender in leadership positions. So I was focusing on my experiences as an introverted woman, female leader. So that's a chapter. So that's my shameless plug, Jamia, there for that. But really the references, I think, are within that chapter really provide some really interesting research studies that explored introversion, and particularly focused on leadership. I'll give another plug for that book, Quiet. So that book I read some time back, and that's when I read that book, I said, oh, that's me. That's when I fully understood that I was not shy, but instead that I was introverted. And it really reframed my view of being a leader, and particularly my view of being a teacher, a teacher in higher education, because although I am an introverted teacher, I sometimes forget that I have introverted students. So I really use that book to help transform my teaching to make sure that I am inclusive of all the different personalities within my classroom. So that Quiet book is really powerful for me.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing these great resources. And I want to, in our last couple minutes together, would like to share the contact information of our panelists. Feel free to reach out to them if you have any sort of questions or if you want to continue the conversation in any sort of way. I've also included my email as well as our general sale leadership inbox. If you have any sort of questions around sale programming, I do quickly want to, I put into the chat a survey link that it will take just a minute or two. If we could get your feedback on different topics that you want to see in the future, how you liked the session, we would love to hear that. And it helps to improve our Leaders Learning Live series, which now this is the upcoming fall schedule, building teams in a multi-generational workplace, succession planning, communicating the value of a SUNY education, and leveraging social media to support learning. So if you'd like to register for any of those, there is a link there. And you can follow us on Twitter, and we also have a LinkedIn page as well. So follow us on LinkedIn. I know Jamia had mentioned that. I'm just looking through here. Thank you all. There's a lot of thank yous in the chat, and also Jamia, Allison, and David, thank you so much for your time with us today. And we hope to see everyone next month. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marissa.
Thank you.